This is the Penderwicks in Spring, Chapter 17, Silence. Ben had never before seen someone sleepwalk, and now that he'd caught Baddie doing it, he definitely didn't like it. As confused as he'd been about her Quigley Woods adventure, at least that had been within normal behavior. Sleepwalking wasn't. He went back to bed, hoping that when he saw her in the morning she would laugh and tell him it had been a joke. But the Baddie he ate breakfast with was pale and sleepy and not in the mood for jokes. Both parents asked how she felt, and she said fine, but Ben didn't believe her. And then, when he tried to bring up sleepwalking on their way to school, she said she didn't want to talk about it. So they talked about nothing. Ben fretted over it all through school on Monday, except during the exciting touch football game at recess, and decided to discuss it with Raphael. He waited until the end of the day, when they were waiting for Baddie outside the big Wildwood front doors. You know how Baddie slept so much yesterday? I caught her sleepwalking last night. Definitely sleeping sickness, said Raphael. No, because the right flies don't live in Massachusetts. Uh-oh. Here come two little girls who looked exactly alike. Ben took hold of Raphael and dragged him across the sidewalk and into the middle of a cluster of sixth graders. What are we doing? Asked Raphael. Usually they avoided sixth graders, especially these extra big ones. An evasive maneuver, which means not direct movement. Ben wished he could explain the twins to Raphael. They were tied up with stuff he'd sworn to keep secret at the Moips. He risked a glance backward through the sixth graders. The twins had disappeared. No, there they were, getting onto a bus. Whew! Alpha Lima India Echo November Sierra, whispered Raphael. Ben didn't think it was a big stretch to call those twins aliens. Yes, but they're gone now. He pulled Raphael back to the safety of a sixth grader free zone. There were several fourth graders nearby, but not big ones, so that was okay. What did they look like? Asked Raphael. Blobs or tentacles, or like robots? Who? The aliens. Oh, Ben wanted to get back to the oddness of Baddie. So it can't be sleeping sickness, and she keeps putting her hand on her stomach. Maybe she has a hernia, said Raphael. A hernia is a painful condition of the stomach. My Uncle Albert had a hernia and needed an operation. It's not a hernia. Ben had never heard of a hernia. She couldn't have that. Maybe a giant stomach tumor then, or maybe she has an alien implantation. Who has an alien implantation? Ben jumped. Somehow Baddie had snuck up behind them. He dropped his guard once those twins got onto their bus. Well, obviously not you, he answered. Raphael, tell her it's not her. Raphael was too busy staring at Baddie. How are you? He asks. She frowned at them both. I'm fine, and everybody better stop asking if they know what's best for them. Sorry, said Ben, though he wasn't, because she didn't look any better than she had that morning, maybe even worse. Sorry, said Raphael, though he wasn't, either because he thought Baddie looked terrible, or he was very curious as to which mysterious disease she might be suffering from. That's better. Now let's go, Ben. The walk home was even quieter than the one in the morning. Baddie didn't ask Ben about how his day went, or what Ms. Lambert had taught his class, or even about his homework. He hated it, and as soon as he got home, he ran across the street looking for male companionship, particularly with a male who wouldn't talk about sisters having alien implantations. Ben found just what he needed behind the Geiger's house. Nick, working out with weights. Can I do it too? He begged. You're too young for weight training. Nick put down the 45-pound dumbbell he'd been using for bicep curls. "But I'm strong." Ben leaned down to grab the dumbbell with one hand, but could just barely lift it off the ground. When he tried with two hands, Nick took it away from him. "If you touch that again, I'll have you running laps until you're in the 4th grade." Being scolded by Nick was somehow more fun than being praised by anyone else. Content, Ben sat on the grass and watched as Nick went through his workout. The very last part was push-ups, and for a special treat, he did them with Ben sitting on his back, proudly pretending to be an army pack crammed with gear. "Enough," said Nick, finally, tumbling Ben onto the grass. "So what's the news in Penderwick land?" "Baddie doesn't have sleeping sickness like Raphael thought." "I'm glad to hear it. Why did Raphael think that?" "Because she slept for so long yesterday." Ben thought for a minute about the nature of the secrecy oath he'd taken, and decided that he didn't have to keep secret what Nick already knew. "But you know why she slept so long? Because she was in Quigley Woods and hurt her ankle. Her ankle's better now." "That's good." "But she's acting weird, different. And she was sleepwalking last night." Nick picked up his dumbbell and started lifting again. "Maybe she's worried about something." "But what?" The Moyes hadn't explained anything at all. "You know my father's dead, right? My first father, not Dad." "Yeah, I know that." "That's what I told Baddie, that everybody already knows." "Huh?" said Nick, and switched his dumbbell to the other hand. "Just keep a watch on her. Consider it collecting data, what we in the military call intel." "Intel." Ben liked that word. "Not that you're spying on her, because you and she are on the same side. It's more like you're on a reconnaissance mission, keeping the area safe for your unit." "Only Baddie is my area." Ben liked this idea. "And I can report to you. If you discover anything you need help with, report to me. In fact, promise me you will." "I promise. And now I need your phone number too." "Oh, you know about that, do you?" "Yes, and I want it on my stomach, not my arm, so that no one else can see it." Nick laughed, but he went inside and came back with a pen. Ben found that having his stomach written on tickled, but he bore it like a soldier. "It's upside down," he said when Nick finished. So Nick wrote it again, this time upside down so that it was right side up for Ben. "Anything else?" "Tommy's number?" "Why not?" Nick wrote Tommy's number down too. "Anything else?" "The phone number for the Secretary of Defense, maybe? Or the woman I'm taking to dinner tonight?" "No, thanks." Ben looked happily at his stomach. "And how was school today for you?" "Good. We played football at recess. Then after school, some twins showed up." "Twins I saw yesterday when I picked up Baddie? The ones who made drawings for you?" "Did you see those drawings? They had hearts and flowers all over them." Nick whistled. "Maybe the twins like you." "I don't want them to like me." "Just tell them you already have a girlfriend. Remy, right?" "No!" He couldn't believe it. Even Nick thought this awful thing about him. "Remy isn't my girlfriend." "Sorry." Nick did look sorry. "I can remember the time when I, too, would have been horrified. These days, I'm delighted when women draw hearts for me." "Well, I'm not delighted. No way." "This is not a big problem. If the twins bother you, tell them. I'm sure you're nice people." "I'm not sure they're nice people." "You don't have to be sure. You're just softening the blow," explained Nick. "Repeat after me. I'm sure you're nice people, but I'm not interested in developing a relationship with you." Although Ben felt that so tame a statement would be powerless against crazed females, he obediently repeated it until it rolled off his tongue. Then he asked Nick to teach him a few military self-defense moves, just in case Tess and Nora got too aggressive. "No, I will not," he answered. "Use words instead." "Then could you teach me to jump out of a Black Hawk?" "Do you see a helicopter here in the backyard? Because I don't." But Nick picked up Ben and threw him out of a helicopter a half dozen times. "Enough? Because you're beginning to wear me out." and I thought that was impossible. One more time, pleaded Ben, who'd landed in a different country each time, and had a few more he wanted to try. No more times, but we can shoot hoops if you want to. Ben did want to, even more than he wanted extra jumps, so they went to the garage for the basketball. Just before they got started playing, Ben thought of another thing that had been bothering him about Baddie. She's quiet now, he told Nick. What do you mean? Like not talking? Yeah, she doesn't talk much, Ben thought for a while. She's not humming at all. Huh, said Nick, and tossed the ball through the net. Baddie knew she wasn't humming. Her sprite had deserted her, been driven out, vanished since the conversation, the one that echoed over and over through Baddie's memory. In exchange for our dead mother, our dead mother, our dead mother, we got Baddie, Baddie, Baddie. Just what we didn't need. She was taking Duchess and Cilantro on an extra long walk through Quigley Woods. Her escape from home, and the pretense of not being thoroughly unhappy. If she'd hoped that her sprite would be waiting for her in here, and she hadn't quite dared to, she'd been mistaken. Baddie had nothing inside her now but regular old human parts, plus a painful knot that gave no indication of wanting to leave. Cilantro whined and snuffled at her, as though he'd sensed her misery. I'm okay, she reassured him, though she knew dogs could always spot a lie. Maybe she had to encourage her sprite to return, lure or attract it back with music. Baddie had never felt less like singing, but maybe the singing would make her feel better. It was worth a try. Sit, she said to the dogs, neither of whom did, but at least for this one moment they weren't pulling on their leashes. Good enough, I guess. Keep it up. I'm going to sing now. She planted her feet, stood up straight, took deep breaths, and broke off, horrified at the dreadful rasping noise she'd made. So it wasn't just that her sprite had gone, it had taken Baddie's very voice along with it, to who knew where and for how long, forever. She sank onto the ground, beside the dogs, overwhelmed with this new grief, piled on top of her already impossible burden of sorrow. So now what was she, if not a singer? Baddie no longer knew. Cilantro pressed up against her, showing his concern. Just that my voice is gone, she told him. You'll still like me even if I can't sing, won't you? While Cilantro seemed okay with that, Duchess gave a low whine, then barked. You can still sing on your own, Duchess, Baddie told her. Whoa, calm down. For it seemed that Baddie's lack of singing wasn't the problem. Some scent or another had gotten Duchess's attention. She was ignoring Baddie, straining against her harness to get at whatever it was. Her excitement stirred up Cilantro, who went into a crouch tubaing his distress. Baddie gathered up the voice. Nick had tried to teach her. Duchess, stop it. I mean it. Sit. This time, Duchess glanced at Baddie, but with a look that meant she had no intention of sitting, now or maybe ever. Then suddenly went rigid. The scent had done something marvelous. Duchess pulled toward it. Baddie pulled back. Duchess pulled again harder, and this time pulled herself right out of her harness. For Baddie, it seemed as though the whole forest went silent, waiting to see what would happen next. Hardly breathing herself, she crept slowly toward Duchess, hoping that the little dog hadn't yet realized she was free. It was vain hope. After an apologetic bark, Duchess gaily dashed off into the trees, determined to follow the scent and all the scents, rabbits, foxes, bears, to the ends of the earth. The ends of the earth came soon enough, what with Duchess's ridiculously short legs, and even with Cilantro trying to pull Baddie in the wrong direction. In those few short moments, though, Baddie started to cry. And by the time she tackled Duchess and was rolling on the ground with her, both of them tangled in Cilantro's leash, she was sobbing. No one was safe with her. Not dogs, not people. What would I have done if I'd lost you, Duchess? The Evasians would never have forgiven me. A contrite duchess, or sorry duchess, licked away the tears, and Cilantro tubaed his sympathy until Baddie had cried herself out. She hooked Duchess's leash to her collar. She couldn't risk the harness again, untangled Cilantro, and stood up. Time to take the dogs back before she messed up anything else. The Evasians, rather than being upset with Duchess's near escape, were delighted. She got out of her harness? That fat dog slid right out of it? Mr. Evasian was so impressed, he bent way down to give Duchess a hug and an extra biscuit. "Don't you see what this means?" Mrs. Evasian asked Baddie. "That means she's lost a great deal of weight. You've done such a good job with her." "We'll buy her a smaller harness tomorrow," said Mr. Evasian, and gave Duchess yet another biscuit, and 2 to Cilantro. "Stop feeding her, Harvey," said Mrs. Evasian. "Baddie, come to the kitchen and bring the dogs with you, before Duchess has gained back all her weight." In the kitchen, the dogs rushed to the corner where the Evasians kept 2 water bowls for moments like this, when Duchess and Cilantro were both thirsty. "Mrs. Evasian, you're really not angry at me?" asked Baddie. "Why would I be angry at you? It was our fault for not noticing that the harness had gotten too big." "But maybe I can't be trusted. Maybe I shouldn't walk Duchess anymore." "You would break Duchess's heart. Your walks are her favorite part of the day. Have a cookie." The cookies were large and cinnamony, and Baddie was glad for them, and glad for an excuse to duck her head away from Mrs. Evasian's scrutiny, or searching. "Are you feeling all right, dear?" "Oh, yes," Baddie smiled to prove it, hoping her eyes weren't still red from weeping. "May I take some cookies home for Ben and Lydia?" "That's a nice idea." Mrs. Evasian piled cookies into a paper bag. "Mrs. Evasian, you've lived here for a long time, right?" 34 years. "So you remember my mother?" "Not Iantha, I mean my birth mother." "Of course I do. She was lovely. Skye looks so much like her, you know." "Yes." "Though Jane has more of her personality, I think. Always laughing." Mrs. Evasian put a few more cookies into the bag. "Take these for Skye and Jane, too. Never too old for cookies, right?" "Right." "I always looked forward to Halloween when your sisters were little. One year your mother dressed them as the 3 little pigs, and once as the 3 musketeers with plumed hats and tin-foil swords. They loved those swords." "3 little maids from school," called Mr. Evasian from the living room. "Oh, yes. That was the year she had them in kimonos and had tried to teach them the song to wave fans around." Rosalind sang the song as best she could. Mrs. Evasian sang a few lines for Baddie. "3 little maids from school are we, pert as a schoolgirl well can be." But Skye refused to sing because she'd broken her fan, and Jane, who must have been only 3, wanted to sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star instead. "I would have liked a tin-foil sword, or kimono," thought Baddie dully. A kimono is a Japanese robe. "Are you sure you're all right?" Mrs. Evasian put her hand on Baddie's forehead. "Do you have a fever?" "No fever," Baddie smiled again. "Just a lot of homework to do. Thanks for the cookies, Mrs. Evasian." "You're welcome, and I'll see you tomorrow." Baddie got Cilantro out of the house before she started crying again. That night, Baddie went to Lydia's room to say goodnight, and to tell Lydia that once again she'd spent the night there. To her parents, Baddie had said it was for Lydia's sake, but Baddie knew that she was the sister most in need of comfort. "So that's great, right?" she asked Lydia. "That I'll sleep in your big girl bed?" "Baddie's bed." "I really am just borrowing it." "Sing," said Lydia. "No singing. Stories tonight." "Sing," said Lydia again. "Itsy bitsy." Baddie wrapped her fingers in Lydia's curls. So soft they were, so springy and sweet. Lydia was looking at her with such trust. I'll try. She swallowed hard. The itsy bitsy spy. But it was just as bad as earlier, maybe worse. Lydia reached up to touch Baddie's lips, as if making sure they still belonged to a human being. Frog, she said. Again. I can't. I'm sorry. With great effort, Baddie kept back the tears. She would not cry in front of Lydia. I'll tell you a story instead. Once upon a time, there was Princess Dandelion-Fire. Once upon a time, Lydia was the princess. Weakened, smashed on the shoals of life, drawn as fine as spun glass, Baddie pulled herself together for one final attempt of the day. Once upon a time, there was a Princess Dandelion-Fire named Lydia. And that is the end of chapter 17.